Good evening, everyone. Welcome to day 6 live session of Master Core Java in 30 days. And today, the original concept of Java is started actually. So, the first concepts in object oriented programming is the object oriented programming concepts. So, in today's session, we are going to learn what are the different concepts that make your object oriented programming as your Java program. So when it comes to an object-oriented concepts in Java, so these are different concepts we start with object, class, inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction, encapsulation and data binding. So these are the concepts we will discuss today, and almost of your Java is working on these concepts. So again every concept will comes under a different chapters in your Java programming. So today we'll introduce all these things, like we'll discuss in brief about each and every OOPS concepts in Java programming. So I'll start with an object. So simply we can say object is an instance to class, or it is a real-time entity, so which is having state and behavior. So you can take in real world, you can take anything, it is an object. Suppose you can take a table, it is an object. Fan, it is an object. You can take any animal, it is an object. So in real world, you can take anything that is known as object. And every object is having three things like their identity, state and behavior. So this identity will give you a differentiation between one object to another object, whereas the state will give you the properties of the real-time entity, whereas the behavior will give you the functionality or the functions. So suppose, see for example, if you take a chair as an object in a real world, you can take a child as an object. So for that chair, so we can take an identity. So it will give you what type of chair it is. Like it will be a wooden chair or it will be a plastic chair. So like that. So it will differentiate one chair to another chair. And coming to a property like color, color of the chair and how many legs it's having, right? The model of the chair and all these things will comes under the state of the object. Whereas the behavior, like means how much weight it is having, how we can move. So all these things we can have a behavior of that chain. So you can take any object. Every object is having these three things. Like they have their own identity and they have the state and behavior. So we simply say in Java, not only Java, in any object oriented programming, object is an instance of the class. So instance is nothing but a current, right? So it object it consisting of an address and it takes some space in a memory. So when you create a class for your Java programming, so your compiler cannot give any space for your class because it doesn't know how much space it required, and that can be decided by your object. So every object is having address and some space in your memory. And now we have many objects in your class, and these objects may communicate with one to another without knowing the details of one to other. So see for example, if you take student is a class and that student is having many objects, like suppose you can take class and that class will consisting number of students. So in each and every student is having their own identity. So you can identify every student by their roll number. Means because it is uniquely identified with their roll number. And every student is having its state. Every student is having their own properties like height, weight, age, and all these comes under the state. Whereas the behavior, so every individual student is having their individual behavior, right? So now we can take instance is nothing but suppose in your class you have 5 students. Now you are talking about the first student. So at that time, that is an object to your class, right? That is an object to your class because student 1 is an instance to your class now because you are talking about student 1, right? That is a mean of instance. And in Java programming, like you can create any number of objects for your class, and depends on that the memory is going to be allotted for each and every object. Okay, and these objects, whenever it required, it needs to communicate with one to another. So in Java programming, when comes with your object concept, so it consisting state and behavior, right? So the state, it will be taken by the variables or the fields which you are given in your class. So whereas the behavior is given by your functions, right? So functions will give you the behavior of the object. And for class, so every object is created at runtime for the given template that is called as a class. So you are creating a object for your class. So those objects are created at runtime. So I will show you all these things. So because we are today at the beginning stage, we have to understand what is object, what is class, and what are the different object oriented concepts available in any object oriented programming. And from tomorrow onwards, what we are going to discuss is along with the programming, like how to create and how to create objects, right? How to create objects and how you are make a linking with your data members and methods, and how to access those things we are discussing from tomorrow. So today we'll just see in brief and try to understand what is what, and then see. So I said already, every object is having three things like their identity and their state or attribute and a behavior or the function. Suppose see here I'm taken employee, right? Here I'm taken employee. So employee is my class. So I said object is an instance to your class. So here I'm taken employee. So now what your identity will say is it will give you the name of the employee. Suppose see for example in your organization, so in your CSE department we have number of faculty members. Suppose you are talking about a particular member. Suppose you are talking about Devi. So she is one of the faculty in your CSE department. Now you are talking about Devi. So Devi is an identity, right? So now Devi is an object. So which having the properties, what your state will say, it gives you the properties. Means employee number, employee name, date of join, what organization she is working, and all these comes as a properties. Simply we can say attributes, or simply we can say data members or variables. So everything is same. So these information will give you the state of your object. And whereas the behavior, so what behavior, the functionality, what she is doing, what she is teaching, what are the hobbies to her. So all these will comes under the behavior. It shows the behavior of an object. So when you take an object is nothing but it's having both state as well as the behavior. So then only we can say that is an object. Okay, that is an object. So now coming to concept of a class. Simply we can say in object oriented programming, class is nothing but it's a collection of data members and member functions. So we have a data members and member functions. So as of just we discussed, object is having the members and functionalities. So we can simply say by that definition, class is a collection of objects. So we can simply say class is a collection of objects. Suppose I said, suppose you can take your class. Suppose you all are BTech first year students or second year students. So your class name is first year. So first year CSC is your class name. And who are the objects? Each and every student of that class is an object to that particular class first year BTech CSC. I hope you all understand what I'm trying to say, right? So class is nothing but it's a collection of data members and member functions. So what do you mean by members and member functions? Both together we call it as an object. So by that we can say class is a collection of objects, and every object is having their own identity, state and behavior. So I can say here class is a collection of data members and member functions. So what do you mean by a data members? So data members is nothing but the variables which we declared inside of the class. So now you can take one class. What are the variables we declared inside of your class, and those variables are said to be data members. So whereas the member functions, so the functions which we declared inside of your class, and those functions are used to manipulate your data members. So such type of functions in object oriented programming is said to be member functions. And these functions can operate on those data members of your class. It cannot operate out of the class, right? So that. So now here is a syntax how you are creating a class in your Java. So syntax will say it's having access specifier. So we have three different access specifiers in Java, like public, private and protected. And these access specifiers will say how far your class is going to access, right? How far? Like it is going to be accessed privately, publicly or protectedly. So I will explain in brief about this public, private, protected later, right? So at this time you just understand. So your class in Java is by default as a public. So even you are not specifying any access specifier before your class name. Simply it will treat as a public, and everybody can access that class. Everybody can access that class. So we don't have a privacy. Right? See, for example, for a real world example, suppose you are working or you are studying in a particular organization, like you have a central library. So everybody which is belongs to that organization is going to access that books. So now we can say those books are public. Everybody can access. Anybody can access. Right? Whereas private. So private is nothing but this is your book. You can only access. Right? This is your book. You can only access. Nobody else can access because that is your private. So that is your own thing. So nobody can access without your permission. Right? So that is private. Whereas protected. So now you can feel someone as your friend and you can feel like that your book is given to that person even that is in a protected. So now you give your book to your friend and your friend is also going to access your book. So that is a protected, right? So I will explain in brief about this concept when we have the access specifiers and modifiers concept is there, because there will be in-depth explanation on this. And then we have to use a keyword class. So I said class is a keyword, right? So simply we can write in a small letters. So because your Java is a case sensitive language, so you can mention everything very carefully, right? So that you can use a keyword class, and then you have to provide your class name. So now your class will consisting a group of, means it's a group of data members and member functions, right? So because of that we have open and close brace. In that open close brace you have to specify your data members and the member functions related to that particular class, right? See, for example, if you have a class of student, now you talk about student only. We cannot talk about any other persons outside than the student. So remember, so for that your class will consisting the data members and the member functions which is related to that particular class. So for example, so this is my class. So I already said if you are not providing any access specifier, for your class, defaultly in Java, it will take it as a public. So even I'm not specifying here my access specifier, your Java compiler will treat as a public class, right? So if you given like this or without this public also, the meaning is same, right? So simply you can use the keyword class, and this is my class name. So I said already, for giving a name to your class, you can follow the camel case. Or else, if you have a single word, you can start with a capital letter. So which will give you that is a class, impression of a class. So here my class name is employee. And this employee is having the properties like employee number, employee name. So here I am interested to take only two properties of my employee class. So employee name and employee number. So then I have two methods or the functions like set employee and display. So what these two functions will do, one function is going to assign employee number and employee name to my employees, and another function is going to display the values which I am assigned. Right? So these are the functionalities. Right? So I can give these data and the behavior by using object only. So I said already, your class is a blueprint or it's a template. It will give you like what it consisting. It doesn't have more than that. When you create an object for your class, then it is a meaningful. Right? Now you are going to communicate. Right? Without objects, we are not communicating with your class. Remember, you have to create an object for your class. Then it starts a communication. Okay, so this is example of a class. And now coming to our next is inheritance. So this is one of the property of your Java, of any object oriented programming language, right? So which provides reusability concept, right? In programming, it provides the reusability concepts. So like see, simply an inheritance is nothing but it's a process of an object can acquire the properties of another class is said to be inheritance. Here for inheritance concept, we have more than one class. Right now, these two classes is having communication between one to another. Simply you can take inheritance concept in a real world. Suppose see you and your parents, right? So you having your own identity and your parents is having their own identity. And now you both has a relationship, right? Is relationship or has relationship, whatever it will be. So now you both are having some relation between you and your parents, right? Now because of this relationship, you are going to get something from your parents that is of your right. Right? See, for example, you can get the property of your parent. So your parent is owning some house, and now because that is of your parent house and you are the right to get that house. Right? So we can get the property of your parent, and we can reuse the property of your parent without redefining. And that concept is provided in Java by using this inheritance concept. So we can say another definition for inheritance, like in Java, it's a mechanism in which one object acquires all the properties and the behavior of the parent object. So I already said like each and every object, either it may be of a child object or a parent object, every object is having their own properties and behaviors, right? So suppose for real time you can take your scene one baby. So now we can see the external features of that baby, and you can say, okay, she or he similar to her mother or her father. She looks like she looks like her mother or father, or she is having some characteristics which is belongs to her mother or her father. Like that you are talking, right? So all these is nothing but the inheritance. Okay. So coming to the terminology which you are going to use with the inheritance concept is class. So simply a class, like it may be of a parent class or child class, we can say it as a class. Right? So it's having some group of objects, like every object is having their data members and member functions. So whereas we have two types of classes here, one is parent class and second one is the child class. So parent class is said to be super class or base class, whereas the child class is said to be derived class or child class or subclass. Okay, so we can name it as anything. So parent class is said to be super class or base class, whereas your child class is said to be derived class or subclass. So remember always, we can derive a new class, that is your child class, from the parent, but we cannot do vice versa. We cannot make a derivation from child to parent. There is no relationship. We have a relation from parent to child. Right? We always say the relationship from the parent to child. So now the child class or subclass is a class which inherits the other class. So it is called derived as we can use an extends keyword in Java for making to extension of one class to another class. So I'll show you a little bit later how you are going to use an extend keyword for creating your child class from the parent class. Whereas the super class or your parent class, it's a class from where your subclass can inherit the features. Right? It is a base class. From that class only your child class is getting the properties and behaviors. So in using this inheritance concept, we are implementing the concept of reusability. So which facilitates you to use or reuse the fields and methods of your existing class when you create a new class. So you can use the same fields and method already defined in your previous classes. So that is a concept of reusability. Whenever we have the same, means suppose see for example you also talking about your parent property. So don't define again in your as adapted to your own. You can say like this is my parent property. So like that you can address them directly with your reference. So that simply we can say as a subclass and everything. So now how we are going to create a concept of inheritance in object oriented programming is simply we can use a keyword class, and here we have to provide the child class name, and using a keyword extends, and then you can provide your parent class name. Suppose see for example, so I have a child class department. So department is my child class and it is going to be extracted from an employee class. So employee is my parent class. From that employee class, I can derive a department. See, if you are working, then only I can say you are working under a particular department. Otherwise, I cannot make a relation between employee and department. Right? I think you understand. So here employee means he is working at somewhere, and now because of his working, I am associated with some department. Right? So he is working under the CSE department or ECE department or something else. So now this is your parent class, and from this parent class you can extend your child class department. And now you have your methods and the data functions like member functions you can define in your child class itself. So in object oriented programming, inheritance is of 5 types: single inheritance, and then multiple inheritance, multi-level inheritance, and this is your hierarchical inheritance, and this is hybrid inheritance, and this is a multiple inheritance. So when we come up with the types of inheritances, like how your child class is going to be take the properties of the parent class. Like it can take from one parent class, or else more than one child class can take the properties of the parent class. Means how this parent and child class can be related to one to another depends on that. We can take 5 different types of inheritances in Java. So the first one is a single inheritance. So in single inheritance, we have only two classes. One class will be acted as a parent class and another class will be acted as a child class. So now this child class get the properties of one parent class. So that is said to be single inheritance. Whereas hierarchical inheritance. So we have one parent class. From that parent we have a multiple children. See, go with your own example. So you have your mother and your mother is having two or three children. So you have your siblings, your sister, brother or something. So now you all are siblings and you all come from the same parent. So such type of relation is said to be hierarchical inheritance. So hierarchical inheritance. So now here we can take, this is a hierarchical inheritance. We have only one parent class. From that parent class we have multiple children. So this relationship is said to be a hierarchical inheritance. So how we are going to implement all these things we'll talk about later. Right here we are at the beginning stage and we are trying to learn the basic concepts. So whereas this is a multi-level inheritance. So it will give you the relationship one level up. Like you have your grandparents, from that your grandparents you have your parents and from that you are existed. So such type of relation is given by your multi-level inheritance. So here the inheritance can be taken in a multiple levels. So here this is said to be your grandparent class and this is said to be an intermediate class or the parent class and this is said to be your child class. And this child class is getting the properties of the parent class directly and the child class is getting the properties of his grandparent class with the reference of the parent class. So we know that. So we can have a right to take your parent property directly. So whatever they own, so you can take their properties directly. So that is possible. Whereas for the grandparent properties you want to take, that is directly not possible. Because of your parents, you are getting the properties of your grandparents. So that your parents are the mediators between you and your grandparents. Right? Your parents are not existed, then your grandparents are not existed. Right? So now the child class is getting the properties of the parent class directly and they are also getting the properties of grandparent class indirectly through the parents. So whenever we have such type of things, then we are going to implement the multi-level inheritance concept. So this is, and coming to next one is multiple inheritance. So in multiple inheritance, we have two parents and one child. So this is a scenario like is a situation one child is having the characteristics of both the parents. Like she or he is having some characteristics of her mother or his mother as well as her or his father. So some of the properties or some of the characteristics they are getting from their mother and also some properties or some characteristics getting from their parent father. So some way they have the common properties and they can acquire to the child. So we cannot say in that situation which property is coming from which parent because some parents is having some similar characteristics. So when the child is having that similar characteristics, we cannot define directly like this character is coming from mother or father directly. So that is an ambiguity we have, right? That is an ambiguity we have. So in order to avoid that, we cannot directly implement the multiple inheritance in object-oriented programming. So for that, we can use the concept of interfaces, right? So we can implement the concept of multiple inheritance. Whereas the last one is the hybrid inheritance. So hybrid inheritance is nothing but it's a combination of so any two inheritances. You can take any of these four inheritance and you can merge of any two. So then that is said to be a hybrid inheritance. So here we can see this is the hierarchical inheritance because from one parent there is two children are existed. From that we are going to extending your inheritance. So this is said to be a hybrid inheritance. And the next concept is polymorphism. So polymorphism is a OOPS concept, so which is an ability of an object to perform different actions based on the context. Suppose, see for example, I am a real example for a polymorphism. Suppose myself, I am Devi, so I am an object from the department, from the class CSC department, and I am going to teach multiple subjects. So if I am coming for third year CSC, I am going to teach compiler design. Whereas I am the same person, if I am going to take the second year students, I am going to teach another subject Java. Right? The same person can act in a multiple ways, can act in a different ways, depending on their situation. Like if I am at third year class, so I am going to teach compiler design. If I am at second year class, I'm going to teach Java. So the same person can do a multiple things. So that is a concept of polymorphism. So in Java, we have two types of polymorphisms. One is compile time polymorphism and second time is runtime polymorphism. Right? Suppose you can take a class shape and that shape is going to draw a triangle, rectangle, circle and everything. So that is a concept of polymorphism, and the compile time polymorphism can be achieved by method overloading, and the runtime polymorphism can be achieved by method overriding. So we'll discuss about what is method overloading and method overriding in depth when we are going to take a concept of polymorphism. So the next thing is encapsulation. So encapsulation is nothing but it's a mechanism of wrapping the data and code, acting on the data, that is your methods, together as a single unit. So we can take some such type of capsules. So you can open that capsules, then only you can see inside what we have, right? So it will be available as a transparent, and from that we can see we have a different materials that are inside of your capsule, right? So that is means hiding the features from the user. We cannot show the functionality. So we can give only the application. We cannot give the functionality, how it is working inside. Internally, how it is going to work. We cannot say. We hide the information. And that can be achieved by using the encapsulation concept in Java programming. So how we can make some data is hiding from the user? Simply we can make your variables of your class as private, and once you make something as private, we cannot access outside world, right? So whenever we want to access those things outside, then we have to make the functionalities or the methods as of type public, right? So then only we can access like your setter and getter method, like read method and write method, and all these methods you have to make it as a public. So that is the concept of encapsulation. And then the next concept is abstraction. So coming to concept of abstraction, it's a process of hiding the implementation details from the user and only show the functionality will be provided to the user. So we cannot show up everything. So we can show up only the things which they are required. So that is necessary for the users. So for example, you go with an online portal and you are trying to fill some application. So you know only that is an application we are going to fill for applying some job, but we don't know after we filling that application, when you click on a submit button, what's happening inside. So that is of we don't need, because once you submitted, your part is completed, and the other part, the internal things, is taken care of by the that people itself. So now we can achieve that abstraction in your Java programming in two ways, that is partially or completely. So by using an abstract class and interfaces concept. So when you are using an abstract class, so it consisting both abstract as well as a non-abstract methods. So because of that, we cannot implement abstraction 100% in abstract by using an abstract class. So we can implement 100% abstraction, means we can hide 100% by using the interface concept in Java. So this is also again one chapter again. So we'll discuss in that in depth about this. So now we have data binding. So binding is nothing but when you have some methods and every method is having their implementation part, like definition part. Suppose if I'm trying to read, how you're going to read is an implementation part. So in Java programming or in object-oriented programming, when this um, declaration of your class is going to be attached with the definition of a class, it's said to be binding. So you can bind your class with methods in two ways. One is at compile time and another one is at runtime. So when you bind your class with methods, so at the time of program itself, at the time of compiling your program itself, then it is said to be early binding. So whereas we can do the same thing at runtime because we don't know which object is going to be taken which method. We cannot say directly. So there we are going to bind the things at runtime. So that is said to be late binding or dynamic binding. So static binding or early binding in Java is refers to the process where the compiler can determine the type of object and it resolves the method during compile time. So at the compile time itself we know like okay the object is going to take this particular method. We can say so such type of binding we can say early binding. Whereas the dynamic binding will say like we cannot have so simply we have a method overriding concept like we have a parent and child class, we have a same method. So we are going to access. So in your main class, so at that time depending on the object of a class which you are going to use, depending on that only we can say okay I am going to use the method of parent or the method of child, right? So that is a runtime binding or a late binding. So I cannot say before I'm going to execute my program. So such type of things is said to be dynamic binding means there we are going to attach your class method definition with your calling. So at the time of runtime, so that is simply said to be a dynamic binding. So these are the concepts of object oriented concepts in Java programming language. So this is not only applicable for Java, any object oriented programming like you can take C++, or else you can take Java, Visual Studio, whatever it will be, whatever the object oriented programmings we have. So every object oriented program is going to support all these concepts like object, class, inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction, encapsulation, data binding, data hiding, all these things will come under every object oriented programming. So only from programming to programming the implementation part is going to change, everything is same. So what is the object we discussed here and the same thing in your C++ also. So but the way how you are going to implement is different from program to program. I hope you all can understand today's session. So I just posted this today attendance link. So just go through and fill that. So still if anyone is having doubts, so you just give your message in WhatsApp. So I'll provide you the link. You just go through and fill that attendance link. So if anyone is having any doubts, you just ping me in live so that I will clarify your doubts. in tomorrow's class, we'll see the concept of class and object, like how you are going to create a class in Java programming, and what is the way we are creating objects, like single object, how you are going to create, and multiple objects, and array of objects, and how you're going to access the methods, and everything we'll discuss in tomorrow's class. So don't miss tomorrow's class. So it will be the beginning of the programming in your Java programming. So as of now, what we discussed, so everything is a fundamental things, like all the previous topics. As of yesterday, we discussed everything of procedural oriented programming. So from today itself, it starts pure object oriented concepts. So don't miss the classes from tomorrow onwards. So after ending of my session, I will share the content, as well as if I discuss any program in the class. So I will share that programs also through the WhatsApp group.